He gets out of the car. He ended up running at me full speed, football tackled me to the ground. I quickly turtled up. When I felt him rise up off me, I take a look and I'm able to avoid 2 kicks to the head.
Hey gang, if you're listening to this right now, odds are you watch videos on the main channel and you've seen how important speed and accuracy are in a gunfight. That's why Active Self-Protection recommends the Range Tech Shot Timer. I'll tell you, it's the lowest cost shot timer on the market that we're aware of, Bluetooth compatible with any Android or iOS device. More features than any other shot timer. You can store all your data on the cloud for free. That's free. Native integration with Practice Score and a visual light-based go signal. Visit them at rangetechtimer.com, rangetechtimer.com, and tell them your friends at the Active Self-Protection Podcast sent you. All right, gang, welcome back to the Active Self-Protection Podcast. I am your host, Mike Williver, your favorite former Fed. With us today, a man who will go by the name of Adam. Adam reached out to us with a video and a story that I thought was worth telling. So he is with us today. Adam, thank you so much for being here.
Michael, very good to be here.
So you reached out to me not long ago with a video, and it's very strange, very odd video. It'll be, hopefully we get this coordinated, that video will be on the main channel. John will be breaking that down. So we wanted to talk about that. But real quick, we'll talk about your background a little bit. Do you have any background in self-defense or martial arts or firearms, anything like that?
When I was in grade school, a classmate of mine flipped me over on the playground and knocked the wind out of me. And I immediately signed up for Taekwondo classes, and I got a few belts up, but not really much since then.
Okay. So you're not completely unfamiliar with self-defense then. Okay. That's kind of what I wanted to know. Can I ask, generally speaking, what kind of work you do or what kind of field of endeavor you're in?
Yeah, I'm currently director of research and development at a local nonprofit here in Los Angeles. In the past, I've been an educator, a bar owner, as well as a couple other things. Very
interesting. You've led several lifetimes already. It sounds like in your young life. You're significantly younger than I am. I do like to say that I've lived 100 lifetimes with all this various cool stuff I've gotten to do over the years. I'm very blessed. So, discussing the incident at hand, there's 2 camera angles that caught what happened to you, and this was recently. How long ago was this?
A few days ago.
Okay. A couple of camera angles that caught it. Really just 2 angles, one facing one way, one facing the other, and it catches most of the action, it looks like, but I'm guessing some things happened off camera that weren't caught on the tape as well. So in the video, you appear to be walking down maybe a parking lot or an alley, minding your own business, and somebody approaches you rather aggressively. So kind of walk us through what happened in your own words.
Yeah, this was about 8:20 in the morning. I was walking home from my usual morning coffee. This is the alley adjacent to my condo. I live right here.
Okay.
This is my home. I was turning into the alley to head toward the front of the building. There was a car parked there at the entrance. I didn't really think twice. As I passed this car, they rolled down the window and started yelling out the window towards me. I had my glasses on, my headphones in, so I gave them a quick glance and ignored them and kept moving.
Good thinking, by the way. That was the right move, by the way, to keep moving. Good idea. So what happened then?
Right. So I ignored them. A couple steps later, I sensed somebody coming up behind me. That's when I turn around and see someone with a metal bat.
So just top of mind, at any point, did you recognize the car, either one of these those 2 people in the car? Either one of them look familiar? You've ever interacted with them before in your life?
I've never seen them before in my life. This was random, unprovoked by strangers. Very odd.
So you said they were yelling at you. Do you recall anything they said or uttered to you during the pre-attack portion of this incident?
Yeah, unfortunately, it was a lot of stuff about race and privilege. You white boy, you think you're better than us. Again, I've never seen these people before in my life. They don't know me. I don't know them. So they started yelling about that. When I ignored them, and he jumped out of the car, he started yelling similar things, talking about this is his neighborhood, get the fuck out of my neighborhood. Meanwhile, I'm standing adjacent to my building, and I told him there were CCTV cameras on us. And I asked him several times if he wanted to go to jail. And he did not appreciate those comments. And that's when he started swinging.
So I've seen the video a couple of times. So for the people who haven't seen it yet, and I recommend you go over to the main Active Self Protection channel and look for it. It should be out at the same time this interview comes out. So tell the people who haven't seen the video. Started swinging his fist, the bat. What did he start swinging?
Right. So when I first noticed him approaching me from behind, he had this metal bat in his hand. He was sort of swinging it in my face a couple times. I put up my arm to block it. He wasn't trying very hard with the bat. Um, during that time, I was sort of walking towards him, putting him on the back foot. As we got closer to the red car, he ended up giving the bat back to the driver through the window.
Interesting.
And then starting in with fisticuffs. Yeah. So he didn't ask for any money or didn't want anything. I just really do think they just wanted to scrap. They're just angry. And so the fight was on, and he started in on me, and I was backing up as he was moving forward, throwing punches, and I was dodging most of them, the car rolling alongside us the whole time down the alley. It's quite surreal.
Is the assailant or the guy in the car saying anything as this is going on, or is he just assaulting you?
So the driver had the windows up, and he was just rolling past at the speed that we were moving down the alley fighting.
And nobody's saying anything at this point?
Nobody's saying anything at this point.
Okay, so this went on for a while, and I'm trying to remember in the video, did they switch places at one point?
Right. So as we were getting toward the end of the alley, this guy, he couldn't land a punch, and his last punch actually grabbed midair. He became very discouraged, gave up, started walking back toward the passenger side of the car.
Right.
That's when the driver gets out, tells him, "Hey, no, take the driver's seat. It's my turn." And then he gets out of the car. I'm already off camera at that point, but he ended up running at me full speed, football tackled me to the ground. I quickly turtled up. When I felt him rise up off me, I take a look, and I'm able to avoid 2 kicks to the head and get to my feet. And by the time I was on my feet, the driver was also discouraged enough to get back in the car. And then we were both saying very unkind things to each other as they drove off down the street.
Were you able to get any punches or licks in at all, or were you just kind of in self-defense mode the whole time?
Yeah, I thought about it, but if I knocked him out and he fell and hit his head and died, whose problem would that be? I'm not interested in escalating. I'm interested in causing more trouble. He looked like someone I could take, honestly, but I was just really in defense mode there. I sort of wanted to de-escalate and just get out.
So you said there was 2 attempts to kick you in the head. Were you able to dodge them or block them with your arms?
I saw them coming, and I was able to move back away from his kick. But with my whole body, so I looked in time.
I would. I don't know about you or where you draw the line, but if I'm down supine position and someone's attempting to kick me in the head, I consider it to be very, very serious assault, very aggressive, bordering on deadly force. You kick someone in the head hard enough, certainly enough to knock you out. At which point, God knows what happens at that point when you're no longer able to defend yourself. So. This is a very strange incident, as I think, you were the one involved, so you would know. No idea who these guys are. No, never seen them before in your life. Is it possible they were offended by something you said or did? It sounds like they just saw you walking literally down the street, and that's it.
Yeah, it sounds like they were just offended by my presence and the fact I exist.
So you are in a part of the country. We haven't mentioned where you are, and we don't have to if you don't want to. That's fine with me to just leave that part out. But I can say that you are in a part of the country that has a district attorney's office that maybe isn't all that interested in prosecuting violent crime. Is that your understanding as well?
And I do think we should name it. Name and shame, absolutely.
Okay, you go ahead. Where are you?
Yeah, Los Angeles. I specifically live in Beverly Hills.
Okay. So the DA there, a guy by the name of Gascon, is kind of infamous around the country with law enforcement and prosecutors as being someone who really, there's no other way to put it, just sort of sides with criminals more than he does victims of crime. And it's really, really, really ponderous. There's no way for you to know if these two were emboldened by that, but I feel like it's kind of common knowledge amongst, knuckleheads in the criminal element in LA that they can get away with stuff like this. Is that your Is that your understanding?
I think that's my understanding and the general consensus of my friends and family and acquaintances, yes, in the area.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to fix that until he comes up for election again. And you would just have to hope that enough people are aware enough of his proclivity towards coddling and almost celebrating the criminal element to vote him out of office. But we'll see what happens. I myself moved out of Southern California about 4.5 years ago and escaped to free America, Southern Arizona. And I haven't looked back. I really haven't. I've been back to the San Diego area a few times, and it's just shocking to see, just trash. A really nice area too. San Diego's a nice place, or it was, and even there, trash on the freeway, trash on the streets, just homeless people absolutely everywhere, all along the freeways. It's really a shame because if California,
I mean,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, Mike, I was just saying I grew up in this city. And, I'm, a few years away from 40. Um, I did leave the country for about 8 years. I lived in Asia. I left around 2011. And it was really, I guess, during that time where everything really went to, um, when I'm talking to people, I sort of missed the decline. And when I came back at the end of 2019, right before COVID hit, and I saw the state of this city and the country in general, I was shocked.
Hmm.
I was coming from a communist country where there are no unhoused on the street, um, no roving criminal elements that aren't controlled by the state.
Right.
So I almost felt safer in that country than here.
That's quite a statement.
Mm-hmm.
So after these two skedaddle after their unsuccessful attempt at assaulting you, I assume you call the police and they arrive. How long does it take them to get there? It is Beverly Hills after all.
Right. So I was right in front of my building at this point. So I walk, halfway down the block, turn the corner, go inside, talk to the doorman, tell them what happened. We start to pull the CCTV footage, and I get on the phone with the Beverly Hills police, call their non-emergency line. They were there in less than an hour.
Yeah, that's it. You would think less than an hour shouldn't be a bragging right, but it is, unfortunately, in a lot of places now. It used to be a fresh assault or an assault just occurred, as we would call it in the business. It would be there, if not lights and siren, then very, very quickly. So they show up an hour later, and what's their general attitude? I assume you showed them the videotape.
I do want to say, though, that it was the non-emergency line and I was uninjured, and I did tell them there was no rush. So the Beverly Hills Department the police department is top notch.
Very well. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So they arrive, you show them the video, and what happens then?
Yeah, they take my statement, tell them the whole story, and everyone's sort of shocked at what happened. Nobody could believe it was unprovoked, but it truly was. And I spoke to the officer, took my statement. We couldn't get a license plate off the CCTV cameras that we have in the building. The quality is too low.
Okay.
Something we may talk about with the board of directors, but the officer mentioned there may be some traffic cameras in the area that a detective may look into. Hopefully we can get a plate off that. So I'm still waiting to hear back on that. That's sort of where we are now with the case.
So I've seen NCIS, I've seen CSI. All they have to do is say the word enhance, and then it magically comes into view. Isn't that, they don't really have that technology? That's just on TV. It's just on TV, isn't it? Never mind.
There's some very smart people working on that right now, I'm sure.
Well, I would hope so. Yeah, it's kind of a running joke with cops and prosecutors is they call it the CSI effect. When a case goes to court, and the defense attorney will sort of grandstand about why wasn't this or that test done. Some of the stuff doesn't even exist. Some of the stuff isn't appropriate, for the type of case that it is. But if they can plant a little bit of doubt in the jury's mind by saying that you should have done the litmus configuration or whatever thing they make up on the spot, well, sometimes that works. Unfortunately, it gets criminals off. So are there any leads that you know of at all finding these two guys, other than the possibility of a traffic camera?
Yeah, that's really it. The car is not too unique. It was a red Chevy Camaro, I think, relatively new, no distinct markings. These two gentlemen were ugly as could be, but, pretty average looking. We really don't have any leads, unfortunately. And the more time goes on, the less inclined I am to follow up. And some family members have told me that, for the sake of others in the neighborhood, and you do need to keep on it, but just as we were describing earlier, the general situation in the city, I'm really just not inclined to follow through.
Yeah, and I mean that I could hardly blame you for feeling that way, because even if the police were successful in finding these two knuckleheads and arresting them, no assault with no injuries, albeit unprovoked, I can't imagine they'd spend more than a night in jail. Is that your opinion?
And yeah, and would that anger them more, and would they be back again?
Yeah, especially because it happened by your house. No one likes anything like this to follow them home. So, the fact that you mentioned to them, hey, there's CCTV cameras, might have indicated to them that you live there. So, yeah, it's a tough one, dude. There's no easy answers when it comes to this stuff.
Well, I can change my behavior. So I now carry something. I won't be specific about what I carry, but I do carry something to protect myself.
Good. Yeah, I highly recommend it. Southern California, still most counties are getting better. Not that you implied you're carrying a firearm. This is just off the cuff, but a lot of the counties in Southern California are getting better about issuing concealed weapons permits, but a lot of them are still trying to throw up any roadblock they can. Related to that, our friend Soleil Roche, she works for the channel as well, is out in Hawaii doing the Lord's work, trying to get them to start issuing permits. The police chief of Honolulu, I guess, gets the final say in who gets a permit and who doesn't, which is preposterous. But some of the counties in Southern California are getting better, especially after the recent Supreme Court decision. So just something for anyone listening who's in that area to consider. If you thought it was impossible to get a CCW permit, it's not really that as impossible as it used to be. They'll still throw hurdles up and try to, delay you to the extent they can. But it is a thing that you can do now a lot more readily than you could in the past. So
it's something that maybe needed now more than ever.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just the strangest thing. During the riots of a couple of years ago and the defund the police movement and all of that, I said more than once, you keep this up, and you are going to have a quality of law enforcement that you deserve with that sort of attitude. If you just go around demeaning, defunding, and demoralizing law enforcement, the result is going to be no one who you want as a police officer is going to apply for that job anymore. And the people with all the experience and the training and the knowledge are going to be leaving, and are leaving, myself included, in droves, taking a large body of knowledge with them. Can I ask, I know it was a very recent event, and PTS comes up in different ways and in different lengths of time. Have you suffered any loss of sleep, anything like that related to this?
No, not at all. Like I said, I was a bar owner for a few years in another country. We were open quite late, so I'm used to the occasional scuffle. No big deal.
Okay, very good. All right, well, do us a favor. I'd like you to follow up at least with me, and I can maybe let the listeners know as this proceeds if there's any developments, if they find these two guys, and if they do, if they actually spend any time in jail. I think I'd like to know. I'm sure our listeners would like to know as well. Is there anything you wanted to add, Adam, before we let you go?
I just appreciate you guys and the team, what you do. I've been a fan of the channel for many years, my friends and family as well. So thank you very much for all you guys do.
You're very welcome, man. That's why we do it. We're trying to change some minds and some attitudes and give people just a little bit of, figurative ammunition to protect themselves when they're out there in the world. So I'm glad you made it through this in one piece, and I consider you a friend now. So anything I can do for you, let me know, please.
Much appreciated, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, gang, welcome back to the Gutowski Files, starring Stephen Gutowski, our intrepid reporter. He is the founder of TheReload.com and the host of the host of the Weekly Reload podcast, which can be seen on all your finer podcast outlets. Also, I think clips and whole episodes are on YouTube as well.
That's right. You can also find it on the less fine podcasting apps, I assume.
Right.
It's just out there everywhere.
Bill's podcast distribution service and Storm Door Company also features the Weekly Reload podcast.
Yes.
Folks, if you are a member over at thereload.com, you get that podcast a day early, and you were in the know a day before your friends. You will have exciting tidbits around the water cooler that none of your friends will have, because you are the proud owner of a membership at The Reload. Stephen depends on his member support to do everything he does over there. There's no sponsors. So he depends on your assistance in doing the important work that he's doing. So this week, we are talking about the kind of remarkable, really, the actual confirmation of a permanent director for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. This happened what was this, last week? No,
Happened. No, today.
today. As
Yeah.
I was. This is why you're here, Stephen. If this was up to me, people would be ill-informed about all of these things. So
48 to 46 vote in the Senate today.
So not exactly bipartisan. Steve Dettelbach was
Well,
confirmed, and there's a lot to talk about here. Quite a few issues, which Stephen we've talked about before on the program, but stuff that bears repeating and stuff that we haven't talked about before. So talk to us about, to start, he ran for Attorney General in the state of Ohio, where he had been the Attorney General, or excuse me,
the U.S. Attorney.
Yeah, the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District. So talk to us about that and some claims that he made that are perhaps not great.
Yeah, well, so one of the controversies with Dettelbach is that he ran this partisan campaign. Like, the president will talk a lot about, and his supporters will talk a lot about Dettelbach's history as the U.S. attorney, because that's a nonpartisan, or at least a less partisan position. It's, the prosecutor for that area, the federal prosecutor. So most of his work consists of, charging people with crimes, and usually major crimes because they're federal crimes. Mm-hmm. And so that's what they focused on. And he's worked with the ATF, and he was endorsed by a lot of law enforcement agencies or law enforcement groups. And so they'll rely on that as his qualifications. But on the other side, a lot of the criticism is derived from this time he spent running for the Attorney General of Ohio. This was back in 2018, if I'm remembering correctly. And he was the Democratic nominee. He lost, of course, but during that race, he did a lot of things that, have followed him into this confirmation period right. for ATF director. First and foremost, he endorsed an assault weapons ban, or a ban on the sale of AR-15s and other similar firearms, the AK-47s, those types of guns, the stuff that everyone debates about all the time, right?
Sure.
And so he took the position that he supports a ban. Now he stood by that position during his confirmation hearing, although he was unable to offer a definition for what an assault weapon is in his mind.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do we ban something we can't even define or give it even a general description of? It seems odd.
Yeah, and interestingly, that was an issue for his predecessor, who failed to get confirmed. David Shipman did the same thing. He said he supported his assault weapons ban, but then couldn't define it when asked in the confirmation hearing. But Dettelbach also, during his campaign, called Ohio's elections rigged numerous times over and over again, which also, especially with what happened later on with former President Trump and the January 6th riot, in hindsight makes those comments maybe less palatable on the Hill, you would think, but it turned out, I guess, not to be so much the case, because he did get through to confirmation. But so that Attorney General race was the source of a lot of the criticism of Dettelbach as a potential ATF director, right? He's viewed as a more partisan player and a gun control advocate because of the stuff that he said during that race. But I guess the thing is with Dettelbach is you have to look at him in the context of the former nominee who didn't make it through, Shipman, Dettelbach is kind of like a watered down version of David Shipman, if you will. He's had less time as a partisan actor, whereas, Shipman had spent decades as a gun control activist, like a paid gun control activist. He worked directly for the gun control groups. He was working for Giffords. Actually, he left Giffords a little while ago after he did this whole scorched earth campaign in the media attacking the Biden administration after his nomination failed. But anyway, he was a much more partisan for much longer, and he was a lot more bombastic than Dettelbach is. And he was a lot more sort of out in media, saying a lot of things for a long time that came back to haunt him. He had made claims about 50 caliber rifles shooting down helicopters at Waco, which isn't true. And he had, he had said all kinds of insulting stuff about gun owners during his media time. He'd done media interviews with Chinese state media and that he hadn't disclosed. So there was a lot more with Chipman. And then, of course, he also had equal employment opportunity complaints against him, dealing with alleged comments that he made about Black agents going through the promotion assessment, saying that they, hadn't earned promotion.
Yeah, we talked about that here previously. I remember that.
Right. We've covered a lot of this stuff, but it's important to bring it all to discuss it all again now that Dettelbach has been confirmed.
Yeah, sure.
But Chipman had, and then I had a Black former agent tell me that he had falsely initiated an investigation against him for cheating on a promotion assessment, which he claimed was racially motivated act by Chipman. Chipman denies that, of course, and continues to deny it today. But that all played a huge part in his nomination. Republicans demanded a rehearing for Chipman in the wake of those allegations coming out and being partially corroborated. And so, there was a lot more going on with Chipman. Dettelbach had his own racial issues in the sense that when he was set to be renominated as U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio, there were civil rights activists who had objected to that process. It wasn't really about Dettelbach in particular, but it was about the process of renominating him, where he was effectively just picked because he had been the previous U.S. attorney under a Democratic administration.
Right.
And when Biden came in, Sherrod Brown, the Ohio Democrat senator, was going to renominate him, but then activists got upset about that, said they wanted a more open process for determining who should be U.S. attorney instead of just picking the white guy who did before, was effectively the argument. You had Tamir Rice's mother was involved in that. And Dettelbach lost out on that renomination because of that controversy. And then when he was picked to lead the ATF, or was nominated, there was already an acting director at the ATF who had been a career ATF official and who is an African American. His name is Marvin Rob Richardson. And he had effectively, the administration decided to pass him over. President Biden decided to pass over Richardson, not just pass him over, but also demote him on his way out. So he had been acting director for about a year. And instead of even considering him to be the permanent director, they actually demoted him and brought in another acting director for the last couple of months. And so, but none of that apparently was enough to keep Dettelbach from getting 48 votes. He got 2 Republican votes in the Susan Collins from Maine and Rob Portman from where's Portman? Ohio, I believe, right? He's the other Ohio senator. And so that was enough to get him across the line. Obviously, I think there was a huge factor in the last couple of months, the shootings that we've seen, especially the Uvalde shooting, had a huge impact on his nomination in the form of motivating more senators, perhaps, especially those Republicans, to say, okay, let's get a permanent director in there. I haven't had a permanent director of the ATF since 2015. So it's just been acting directors since that time.
Right.
So, that, and frankly, the shooting at Robb Elementary School happened the day before his confirmation hearing. So several of the Republican senators who might have been more critical of his past and who voted against his confirmation weren't at the hearing. Specifically, Ted Cruz of Texas,
right,
was in Texas dealing with the aftermath of the shooting when Dettelbach's confirmation happened. So there were still some tough questions from people like Tom Cotton, Republicans like Tom Cotton, and and Josh Hawley, but it was a much more subdued confirmation hearing than what Chipman got for sure.
Yeah, let's talk for a second about his desire for an assault weapons ban. I think it's remarkable that when asked directly by a United States senator to define an assault weapon, quote unquote, he was unable to give any kind of coherent definition. I mean, it's another one of those terms that I think it's bandied about and thrown about by people, and most people have no idea. They have probably in their head a picture of an AR-15 with a bunch of attachments on it, but he was pushing for an assault weapons ban, and I can only assume that. I mean, the ATF doesn't make law, right? But they do make some regulations, and I wonder if that'll be something he's attempting to enact while he's the director.
Well, I mean, he wouldn't have power to just enact an assault weapons ban on his own at the ATF.
Right.
Although obviously we've seen some of the ways that the ATF's powers expanded over the last 2 years under President Biden with some of the rule changes that they've proposed and put into place, especially on what constitutes a firearm under federal law. But it's very unlikely he'd be able to do something like institute a sales ban on all AR-15s as the ATF director. Without new legislation, it's not. It's be a big stretch for them to try to do something like that. But I will say that so he when he was asked about the definition, he said basically his position was, well, here's his quote. He said, "quote When I was a candidate for office, I did talk about restrictions on assault weapons. I did not define that term, and I haven't gone through the process of defining that term. That would only be for the Congress if it chooses to take that up to do." So he was repeated. Senator Cotton pressed him on this a number of times, and he kept deferring to the idea that it would be a legislative body's duty to define what an assault weapons ban. And then Cotton even asked him, we'd had an assault weapons ban in the 90s, 94 to 2004. We had one on the federal level, and obviously there's still some states that have them. So he asked him if he could just define, use the 94 definition. What was that? And he said, quote, "I don't know enough about that. That's a definition that I'm not particularly familiar with. And I haven't studied the data on how, on that particular definition. I've heard comments on both sides of that, Senator. I acknowledge it's a very difficult issue that is for this body to decide." So, he kind of, it's pretty odd. It's pretty odd to say you support an assault weapons ban and then refuse to say even a tiny bit about the definition. And it was the same thing with Chipman, and I just found these to be really weird. And it was especially weird seeing Dettelbach do it the same mistake again that that Chipman got a lot of criticism for, because you'd expect that, I don't know, if he'd just watched the previous confirmation hearing, or whoever is preparing him for this, that they would realize this would be a question that would come up. And it's not that hard to give a definition that fits with the 94 definition from federal law is fairly straightforward. It's just a semi-automatic centerfire rifle with detachable magazines that has two or more of certain features, including pistol grip or a telescoping stock, mm-hmm. or a flash hider or a bayonet lug or a barrel shroud. It's not that complicated to read out the definition or something close to it from the 94 ban. So I don't know why they aren't able to do this.
Yeah, and going back to what you said a moment ago about his answer to that question, that's not something I'm really familiar with. Dude, you are in a confirmation hearing to become the director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Seems like something you should have in your crib notes, written down in front of you maybe in case you couldn't remember it, but maybe it's just me. So, Stephen, in your article, you talked to Mark Oliva from the National Shooting Sports Foundation. Talk to us really quick about their take on this, because he did say they've enjoyed a cooperative relationship with the ATF for a long time. What is his sense about this confirmation and what it means?
Yeah, so the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is the industry's trade group, the gun industry, they've been opposed to his confirmation for basically the reasons we've been discussing here. And effectively, in his statement to me, they talked about a lot of the programs that the industry does with the ATF. They have actual programs that they work together on, and those include "Don't Lie for the Other Guy," which is an informational campaign about against straw purchases,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then they also have Operation Secure Store, which helps gun dealers better lock up their guns at night to prevent thefts, which are increasingly common, right? And so here's what the bottom line was, though. While the NSSF, this is a quote from Mark, while NSSF has considerable concerns of Mr. Dettelbach's close relationship with gun control groups, which, by the way, the gun control groups all endorsed his nomination and celebrated it,
right.
his confirmation as well. So just to be clear on where, each side of the political aisle is on his directorship, but his embrace of bans on entire classes of firearms, advocacy for universal background checks that are unworkable without a national firearm registry that's banned by federal law, and the damaging, quote, zero tolerance inspection policies being pushed by the Department of Justice. NSSF hopes Mr. Dittelbach appreciates and considers that the firearms industry is invested in real solutions to prevent the criminal misuse of firearms. Right. So, it doesn't sound very promising as far as what the industry thinks the relationship is going to be like now.
Yeah, and then probably the most disturbing quote from this, I believe, is President Biden, who said he would continue to take, quote, historic executive action, unquote, on guns, and expects Dettelbach to play a critical role in enforcing the orders he issues. I got to tell you, I don't know when this started, this executive order free for all from the president over the last few, and it's been Republicans and Democrats. I don't like it. I don't like that the president can just sign an order and there we go. That's not how this country works. We have a legislature for this sort of thing. And if you can't get it through a legislature, well, then you can't have your policy or your law. And
yeah, I mean, part of that is the Congress constantly, Congress has been kind of willingly giving away its power in recent decades to the executive and to the court system, right? Like a lot of our fights now happen in the courts. A lot of big policy decisions are done there, and or through executive orders. You get a lot of pseudo lawmaking that way, and so that has been a very long-term trend where lawmakers find it less politically risky to allow somebody else to, foot the bill on these sorts of things politically. Right. And then it's a problem.
And then point at the Supreme Court and say how it's, if it's a decision they disagree with, the Supreme Court is obviously an antiquated body. We need to either pack it or abolish it or whatever. All sorts of really sort of reckless talk. So was there anything else about this we talked before and you wanted to cover, or did I forget anything?
No, I mean, one of the important things to recognize here is why this matters so much. The ATF has had directors, right? But they haven't had a permanent director. And the permanent director being in there for 4, 5, 6 years could really change the direction of the agency. That's the big deal here, is and so that's why it matters what kind of person and what sort of ideology they have when you're putting them in that position, because if they choose to stay, they could really reshape how the ATF does everything. Sure. And what their approach to the industry is, whether it's going to be, a more cooperative working relationship. The ATF gets a lot of its leads from the industry. The dealers themselves are the ones who are often calling in tips or concerns that they have about somebody who tried to buy from them or whatever else, or somebody selling in an illegal way at a gun show or something that they've witnessed. That's where a lot of the ATF's everyday leads come from when it comes to gun trafficking and so forth. So the agency really has to have some sort of working relationship with the industry. And if instead you're going to go at it with an approach that an adversarial approach, that could have a significant impact on not just the gun industry, although it could certainly have a significant negative impact on the industry, in the form of a lot more FFLs being revoked, federal firearms licenses, over relatively minor infractions. That's what when all of us talking about the zero tolerance policies, that's the concern that they're talking about, is that it's not that they're we're just shutting down these gun dealers over minor infractions that aren't actual, they don't have anything to do with stopping gun crime. Now, obviously, on the other end of that, you have gun control activists who argue that the ATF doesn't do nearly enough to police rogue or bad apple dealers. That's been the argument from them for years. So the way that the ATF director comes down, if he's a permanent director, on that debate is going to have a big impact on how the agency works with the industry and how well they're able to fulfill their mission, right? And it certainly seems that what they've ended up with, what Biden has been able to put in place here, is somebody who is committed to his view of the gun industry, which is a highly negative one, but in a way that's much less confrontational than his first nominee, David Chipman.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting going forward to see how this guy conducts himself. For example, does he go to SHOT Show like Marvin Richardson was known to do? I think it's important. Look, the ATF shouldn't be an agency, in my opinion. Maybe there's a need for a small amount of federal oversight when it comes to firearms, but for the most part, I don't think it should exist. I've worked with ATF agents that I have a lot of respect for, that are very good, by the way, very pro Second Amendment people. So as long as we have an ATF, that's who you want, working there as an agent. I think everyone benefits when there is a good working relationship between the industry and the ATF, and we'll have to see how that works out moving forward. Although I'm not filled with hope after this nomination, this confirmation.
Right. The thing about the ATF too that I think a lot of people don't, especially in the gun world, don't take into account, right? Because in the gun world, they have an extremely negative perception, right, of the ATF that's based off of legitimate criticisms of things
sure.
like things like Waco and Ruby Ridge,
right,
and some of the way that those events were handled, and then just general, like you just described there, general distaste for the concept of the ATF. But certainly, most people, I think, would agree that the basic mission of trying to stop gun crime, or the flow of illegal guns into the hands of gang members or criminal actors, is a good mission, and one that the ATF should focus on. Whereas, and it really is a difference of perspectives. Like, how do you accomplish that, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I think most gun rights advocates would say that you have to focus on the people who are the actual criminals committing these crimes, and try to intervene there. Whereas the gun control groups would take a much broader view and say that the ATF should spend more time policing the industry to ensure that the flow of guns is stopped at that point, at the very first source, when the gun is sold initially. And so any infractions, or if you sell too many guns that end up in crimes eventually, that should bring a lot more scrutiny than currently is brought on dealers. And obviously the industry feels that that's the wrong approach, because it's going to single out a lot of people who aren't actually doing anything wrong, in hopes of catching rogue actors. So the way that the ATF director, again, who can shape the whole strategy of the agency over years, if he's a permanent director, which now Dettelbuck is, the way he approaches that question, or that perspective dichotomy, where he comes down is going to matter a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I'd also like to know, I don't know if you can find this for me or not, but I'd like to know the numbers. I used to arrest people all the time for 922G, which is felon in possession of a firearm. It's a federal charge, which is a great charge to put on someone who has no business with a firearm because they're a criminal. I would like to know